Excuse me, is the meeting muted? I cannot hear.
Who cannot hear?
That's Lisa
Lisa
Aller,
Aller.
who is our
Somebody else
finance
that-
director.
Is she on that?
Yes, sorry.
All right.
So I didn't do
No,
that.
I just wanted to know what you do when we're not in session.
No.
I'm sure
okay.
you must have other duties as assigned,
Yes.
as they say.
Yeah, well, whatever the commissioner needs, but I started in January with this department, so.
He's also the communications director, so we have a lot of FOIA requests.
That's what I was-
Yeah, the whole
I
communication.
didn't have anything in that.
I was hoping you weren't just limited to us, because that would be very
That would be a
torturous.
boring job.
You will keep us busy, that's okay.
Yes.
So the department integration fits into the budget because what you will see in this budget is a fully integrated budget. What we had prior to this is we had 5 individual appropriations. And so what we've done with this budget submission is we've combined those into one appropriation. Again, 2 separate enterprise funds, but it makes it much simpler for a department. We're not structured as 2 different divisions.
But you
anymore.
probably have costs allocated across your time,
Absolutely.
for example, and other business office functions and so forth.
Absolutely.
across each of
Yep.
those.
Yeah, absolutely. So that fits into the budget. We have had a couple of major, what we call IT projects, that are mostly operational as well. We have a gaming, new gaming vendor for our lottery gaming operations. So we just rolled out a brand new vendor, Scientific Games, that went live in October. There's a lot in the lottery world. There are major international organizations that run these back-end lottery systems. There's a lot of security involved. And so it's basically a 10-year, $150 million contract that was probably 5 years in the making. So that was rolled out in October. It's providing a better experience for players. And there's a lot more we can do on the back end reporting. So that was a good project for us that we rolled out this past year. The other is our licensing online portals. So if you are require a liquor license, historically what you did is you literally printed out the form, filled it in, wrote a check, and somehow got that to the department. I often would hand deliver these to the department. It was that antiquated. So we finally got up to the 21st century and we launched an online licensing portal, which has cut the time from processing licenses from maybe 5 to 6 weeks to literally 5 to 6 days. So that was launched in August and that is going well. We're in the process now with renewals. We have a whole bunch of licenses that are having automatic renewals right now. Those kind of are the highlights. We obviously do a lot of education. So our mission is to do, it's really a dual mission. We're a really unique department in that we have a lot of public safety because we want people to be consuming and playing responsibly. So that's a big part of our mission, is to make sure that we are educating people about what responsible gaming is and responsible, alcohol consumption. And we obviously have an education team that works with our licenses to educate them about serving. We have a requirement for a liquor license. You need to have education, a certificate.
That's gonna be all online now.
There's a couple different options that we offer. Obviously with COVID, we have to go all online and then you can do in person. And then you as an entity, if you're a business like say Far Hill Gin, you can have the licensing education done at your premises. So marketing, we're really just focusing on educating people about what the liquor control fund generates to the general fund, and then on the lottery side, what it generates to the ed fund. On the staffing, we are basically fully staffed. We have a couple of promotions, so we have some, vacancies there, but we see the issues on the side of the retailers and they're not able to staff fully. And so that causes a problem because sometimes sales get impacted. And then of course you mentioned that our legislative priority is sports betting. So we can talk about the ups and downs if you want at this point, unless you have any questions about kind of the overview that I quickly went through.
No, I don't see any questions. We'll keep going. We have other documents here as well. These are related.
Yeah, that's related to sports. Yeah, correct. So I have the ups and downs, just a couple of things to walk you through. Basically, our FY '23 as passed was roughly $13.9 million. The request for and the governor's recommend for FY '24 is 14.68 and change. So it's about a 1.6% increase, quite modest as an annual increase. In terms of the ups and downs, you see that there's some revenue increases, salary adjustment increases. We've also done a considerable number of requests for reclassification. That's when we're looking to pay our workers more money. In this integration, we gave people more responsibility, and so we have essentially more funding in this budget to accommodate the RFRs. On the federal column, we basically, the FDA tobacco compliance contract expired on it is expiring on May 2023. So all of those spending authority in that column for the federal are negative.
All right, well, I was just looking at ups and downs, but this is as the governor proposed as opposed to what's maybe coming out of the House.
And I can review that. So that
That's always
explains.
clarifying, why is that
Right.
general fund request there?
Exactly. So I'm happy to walk you through right now. So this new initiative, that's the sports betting. Originally, it was in one time, and that's for the contracted services and the personnel services. So that's 440,000. And then you add the operating amount, which is down below 105,000. So the total of the new initiative to start that up is 545. The governor had put that in his budget as one-time funding, and the House decided to fund it deficit funding. Is what I understand the latest is.
They discussed that, but in the end, they did not. They actually put it into a special fund, funded the problem gambling and the administration, and then the transfer into the general fund
Okay.
is not, so they did acknowledge the lower net revenue for FY '24 in their
Okay.
budget build.
So, yeah, so what we had, so they changed it from, well, I don't want to get too confusing. So what they did, and I'm happy to come back and talk about sports betting anytime, where the bill stands now is it's basically setting up an enterprise fund. Just like right now we have Vermont Lottery with an enterprise fund, and then we have liquor with an enterprise fund. At one point in the House, they had the money going right into the general fund. And what they did is said, no, we're going to go back to having an enterprise fund. And just like we do now for the liquor control, it comes directly to us. We take out the admin costs and running that business, and then we send it over to the general fund. And that's what they reverted back to. So that's how it's set up now, which makes sense because that's how the department operates. It's two different enterprise funds.
But that will change the second year, right? Or will it?
No, that's the problem gambling fund. So what happens, the proposal now is the revenue that the state makes from the wagering revenue comes to the department into this enterprise fund for sports betting. Then there's an amount from that will get sent to the Department of Mental Health as the problem gambling fund. So what the National Council on Problem Gambling and Senator Seals will remember this as a best practice when we have the sports betting study committee discussions. They recommend a percentage of your wagering revenue, and their recommendation was 2.5%. And that's what the sports betting study committee recommended, and that's what originally the House had. Then as it makes its way through the various committees, it got rearranged. So it ended up being a direct appropriation to Department of Mental Health for the problem gambling. And when it's back in the Senate now, or is in the Senate. And I had a conversation with them a couple weeks ago, and I sent them a memo, which you have, and I'm going to be testifying again on Friday, that they really should be funding the problem gambling fund through a percentage. When I had testimony in the House, I recommended just doubling that. If you want to be sure that you have enough money in the problem gambling fund, don't artificially set a floor, which is what exists right now. I said, just make it a 5% of the wagering revenue. And as the market grows and as the revenue grows, you're going to have more players. That is an organic and appropriate way to fund the responsible gaming fund, not 250,000 the first year and then 500,000 the second year and then nothing thereafter. I think that was an oversight. So my recommendation is that
Just go to a 5%.
just go to a 5%.
That
That's
was, the sports betting
Yes.
committee was at 2.5%.
correct.
And part of the reason was, we anticipate the revenue being larger than what has been recognized here.
So a lot depends, a percentage of what that
Correct.
base
Of
is.
the actual revenue.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, you could do a percentage up to
A ceiling.
a ceiling, right?
Yeah.
If you know,
Or you could do.
I mean, at some point
There,
you might have diminishing returns in terms of how much prevention.
the question. We face the same thing with cannabis.
What about the 200,000 for the consultant on sport? Is that an annual deal or?
That's part of the cost of operating the program, because we have put in our budget a director of sports betting, which most states do. They have a director of sports betting, and then a finance person, because this is, you basically need to set aside some bodies, some FTEs. And then a sports betting consultant, the value of that is that they have enormous expertise setting up these programs and managing these programs in other states. So they're going to advise us to help us as we set this up and as we manage it.
Yeah, but what about the second, third year, fourth
This would be
year?
an ongoing cost.
Correct, this
the
is part
question.
of the administrative cost. So,
Yeah, but shouldn't the director, their staff finally get a handle on what they're doing and be able to?
Potentially.
Consult. a
Well, I guess with
consultant once in a
experience, you might
while.
find
Correct.
after year 5. you
Yeah,
don't need
exactly.
to-
to your point, like, we built it in basically because we need we don't have the expertise right now. So we have two people that we put into the budget, a director of sports betting and then the finance person. Will we need that 5 years from now? Maybe not. And the operator fees, that's the other thing to point out, is the operator fees actually are designed to cover that $550,000.
Yeah, but it's still 550,000 that somebody won't have to use for something. else.
Understood. I think the thing to remember is this is very new. It's an evolving market. Obviously it's new to us. We're giving our best recommendation on how we think this is going to work. We were using the sports betting consultants now. Could we imagine that in 3 years we don't need that? Absolutely, yes. But right now we do.
But you've got to have
But
some
it has to be
staff.
appropriated each year.
Yeah.
So the legislature would at least have a say in it.
Correct.
I think I'd head to a state where they already have this, if it's running good, and hire their director to come to Vermont to maybe look
Well, maybe.
after
In a
elk.
big state like New York, I don't think they're gonna come to Little Vermont just
They're probably making a percentage.
Well, one of the
they're
things,
probably going around, right?
one of the things that when you say like New York, where they have casinos and race courses where they can have betting on,
Go to Saratoga in the summer and the racetracks running.
and you can bet there on whatever's going on. But we don't have those places, so would you set up a shop in Burlington where they can make wagers?
I'll try
One of the
that.
things the
Right.
consultant would be looking at.
And that's something the sports betting study committee looked at, and the recommendation was only
Out
online.
of business, theoretically.
Well, yeah, I mean, the idea was to put, that's the idea
Right.
behind legalizing cannabis, was to put the illegal market.
Right.
Or put a dent in it. But I would suggest that other states have already had experience there.
You still need to have some administrative horsepower to take on a new
Correct.
enterprise.
So how many states have professional advisors like that model? Probably a lot.
Yeah, they all have consultants to help them because it's such a new,
Specialized.
right, and very specialized and very technical. And so, yeah, that's what we had determined.
The
was
operators
necessary.
like FanDuel are not interested in Vermont's revenue, they're interested in their revenue.
Now, one of the,
So they're not giving us good advice.
Right.
and, or there's a certain bias, shall we say.
Yep.
Be careful the source. Then, of course, we're getting the emails about the number of operators, and some
Yes.
people are suggesting, I guess, unlimited, and
Yeah.
are you recommending a certain number?
Yes, in the sports betting study committee, we recommended 2 to 6. We wanted to definitely have competition. We heard a lot from JFO in terms of the size of the market. And Vermont is a very small market. We know that. We only have 660,000 people. And then you're gonna have a very small
And some of
subset.
those are under 21.
Correct, and you're gonna have people like me who aren't interested in
working on
online
tobacco.
sports betting. So you're gonna have a real subset. It's
Let's
gonna
be
be
honest.
small, so what JFO had recommended that really, it can be a competitive market because you can set up competitive lines, but the optimum was 2 to 6. So I
That
see
was one
no
of the
reason.
best study reports because the recommendations were so specific. and
As
you
a
said
member of that
exactly
committee, I
what
have
to
a
do.
problem.
And I know, and I read that compared to some, and you say, what does this tell us? And you're like, I haven't got a clue, and who's gonna take it from here? That was one of the best reports in terms of specific recommendations to move forward.
Well, we had
So-
a good chair.
I just wanna
Thank
say
you.
that.
We had a good
You know, it really was, it had great utility, and so I'll throw that out, because I did read the report.
No, it was a good committee to work with.
So that's the number that's in the House bill, and that's the number that.
So you have some discretion, 2 to 6.
Correct, and that would be done through a competitive bid process. So the department would develop the enhanced procedures for the board to approve, and then we would develop the RFP, just like we do. It's a normal standard operating procedure for the department. We send out RFPs for lottery agents and liquor agents and, big, international companies for vendors, for lottery. And so we develop an RFP, basic standard contracts, the state puts in place, totally protects the state. And then we send the bid out, and then we, see who submits a bid, we evaluate them to make sure they're meeting the criteria, and then we select the operators that we think make sense, and then we negotiate the contracts, and the hope is to get this all set up by the end of the year.
We had the example in New Hampshire, which only has one.
And they're only getting like 10 or 11 million, I remember on that.
Well, they were doing well until Massachusetts legalized it last month. That's when they went way down because a lot of people were crossing the border
Sure.
to make their bets.
And then the New Hampshire Lottery Commissioner has been a real resource for us. The Vermont Lottery is part of Tri-State, so we have partners in Maine and New Hampshire that we work closely with. And so Charlie McIntyre is the commissioner, lottery commissioner from New Hampshire, and he's been invaluable resource. He's testified last year in the Senate Economic Development Committee when they took it up, and then he's testified or spoken to us in the Sports Betting Study Committee, and he also spoke to one of the House committees. So good resource in terms of how they're doing quite well, and how they're doing it in a way that limits provisions in the statute, right? So the idea and one of the priorities the Sports Betting Study Committee articulated, in addition to wanting to move the illicit market to the regulated market and to maximizing revenue and to having those valuable consumer protections that don't exist right now, the idea was to give the regulatory body, the Department of Liquor and Lottery, the responsibility and some leeway to negotiate and to set this up, because the market is so
Dynamic.
correct, that you need to give that, have a really strong, responsive regulatory body. And that would be us.
And so the House has passed the bill and it's in our Economic Development Commission as we speak.
Yes, and this is what I just articulated. This is the Joint Fiscal Office. I spoke with Patrick Tillerton when he developed this. The reason the revenue for FY24 have come down a little bit is because you're only going to see 6 months of FY24 revenue, because we're hopefully going to get it started. Pardon me?
Did the governor's budget
He had-
assume the revenues?
He had a higher number.
He had a higher number.
Because it was based on the initial JFO projections, and then the JFO revised their
And the
projections.
timing changed a
Correct.
little bit.
But the DFO
Assumption
is
when it-
based on the House.
Yes, so the
Yeah.
House bill based, yes, this is this is the fiscal note for the House bill. That's correct.
They direct appropriated money for the,
For the startup.
yeah, but they also direct.
They booked the
for-
1.2 million in the budget.
Yeah, for problem.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, I thought you were talking about the revenue.
No,
from
they,
sports.
they direct appropriated, so we did a percentage.
Correct. That's exactly what we talked about, was trying to change
You'd still
that.
have to appropriate it. The percentage would dictate what you appropriate, but I don't think that would automatically make the money authorized. If you would, the function of the legislature to appropriate.
Well, but if,
Are you talking about off the top as administrative costs?
yeah, if
And
it's a
so-
percentage of.
Yes, that's how it's in the House bill.
That's,
So,
but you would put a number in as a
That-
percentage of.
So
revenue?
just in your annual budgeting, your appropriations would match the estimate, that's the.
Well,
that's
the estimate of revenue was $1, and you're gonna put let's say, you're gonna put 5% towards from gambling.
Yeah.
Then it'd be 5 cents.
I'm just saying that 5 cents has to be
So
appropriated.
you have to estimate the revenue.
Yeah.
But it would be a different amount. You notice I use $1 because it's simple.
the way we do it is we request spending authority, right? So it's not an appropriate. I know that Senator Sears, what you're talking about right now in the House bill, they do have it appropriated for the problem gambling fund.
Right.
What we're trying to do is change that so it's a 5% of the wagering revenue.
Right.
We,
But that, my discussion with Stephanie is,
she believes it still needs to be appropriated.
You can set the 5%. The spending authority and appropriations are the same thing. That has to be given to you by the legislature.
I understand that,
Yeah. I'm just using the terms that my ace finance director has taught me, which is spending authority.
but
Well,
in this
that's what we're
case,
talking about, and we
Yeah.
give it to you.
in
Yes,
this case,
exactly.
you would take the, whatever JFO estimates as the revenue
And estimate 5%.
and estimate 5%, and that would be the appropriation. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
You got it.
And if it came in less than the revenue projected by JFO from gambling, you'd still get 5% or whatever the revenue. is,
Correct, that's
But
exactly
not
right.
500,000.
Right, that's exactly right. Yes.
You got it.
Was there,
Wow, no wonder I'm on this committee.
there-
I've learned math since I got here, you know.
So Senator West,
Yeah.
was there any, and I understand you thinking for the 5%, and but the original, the House, when they did that, said a flat amount the first year and a
Yeah,
flat amount the second year. And then, was there
Forgot.
any thought that when it got to a certain level, that you would go back to the 2.5% automatically based upon what the study
revenues are really
committee?
correct, and that's, yes, Chair Kornheiser asked the question, like, at some point, if we are generating a lot of revenue from sports betting and we have 5%, is that gonna be too much?
well, you can do it up to a maximum.
Exactly, and I said, I imagine because this is new, that we are going to be tweaking
And maybe
things
more
along.
theoretical for a
Hey,
while.
let's get it started, right? And then we can see what actually is happening and the revenue that we're getting. And then we can always come back and have that changed.
Yeah, the money comes harder if it's not.
Can you talk a
especially-
little bit about how this
Yeah.
works? I understand the money, yes, but not completely. You have operators in the state.
Correct.
We're each gonna have a different app that we could use on our
Correct.
phones.
Right.
And
That's
so
correct.
are we gonna have
So
a
the question
Vermont
is, should we
app?
put?
It's
If
a,
you don't create an
so the
expectation,
the
you can
operators are
operate.
international companies,
Okay.
right?
Whatever we think is
And
reasonable.
they are, most of them operate in 36
Everywhere.
states, 30 states. And
Somebody will
the
wake
way
up
they set it
10,
up so that it
15
works
years
for
from now,
Vermont is geofencing, right? So they have the ability to understand what the Vermont market is. So I give you an example right now. DraftKings operates in New
Don't
York
cheers.
and operates in New Hampshire. A colleague of mine over Super Bowl happened to be in New York and she was having fun with the app and won some money, was able to, download it, have it go to her bank account, and the minute she crossed into Vermont, the app stopped working for her because it's not set up to work. So that's how
Get your money before you come home.
she said she was glad at that point that she ended up making the transaction complete in New York. But so the problem, and this is something Senator Sears and I pointed out, because we don't have for legal sports betting, right? Like we want to collect that revenue, right? Right now, we're giving it away to New York and New Hampshire
And Massachusetts.
and Massachusetts.
Can they geofence the bets? So even if it's legal here, the betting terms are different by state? Like maybe to adjust for the tax? So the bet might be different for a Vermont resident than a New Hampshire resident.
Yeah,
It depends on, yeah, exactly, because every state has the jurisdiction to decide what kind of bets that they want to allow, and that's something that we had.
If it was the same bet, like you're just betting on the Super Bowl, keep it simple. I'm assuming
the odds could be different.
the odds or the payout, yeah, the odds could be different
Correct.
based on what the tax they have to pay.
Correct, and that's why we've been advised by other states and the sports betting, industry, the consultants, that you want to make sure that you're creating a competitive market in Vermont. So we want to make sure that we're not making it so restrictive and so cumbersome that we don't have operators that are going to bid on the RFP. We also don't want to make it, as you're pointing out, Senator, not enticing to bet here, right? Because they have that app, they can easily bet it on DraftKings in New York or New Hampshire. We want to make sure that we're setting up a competitive market so that we encourage them to bet here.
But it's the same with cannabis or tobacco.
Yeah.
All these things
Except
could have.
Except that you can't, with the cannabis, you can't take it to New York, because
Right,
you saw.
Yeah.
Well, you can, you just have to pay.
Yeah, it's just
You
illegal.
can't, yeah, you shouldn't put it on YouTube.
Right.
Other questions about this? Normally, we would have had to wrap up at 4:30 because we're moving into another meeting, but it's been an interesting discussion, obviously, to end the day. Other questions,
Yeah. That's good.
Commissioner?
I'm happy to come
Lot of
back
work
anytime.
ahead. Obviously, you're excited about it.
Very
so,
excited.
Yeah, I know. Well, we've been excited
I
too.
know, you all have been
So
excited.
it's nice to have a bill that's passed the House this year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a huge,
Yeah,
That's a huge change.
huge, huge, huge.
So with that, unless there's